Casting interview horror. I've had my fair share of creepy people throughout my lifetime. Bucharest is a city where things like this rarely happen, so just take it from me, I had bad luck. First of all, let me just say I'm not your average scaredy cat dude who legs it when someone stares at them for too long, like I've seen some posters here do. I'm also not gonna hide under my bed if my house gets broken into. You better believe I'll stop their asses with no regards of my own safety. Keyboard warrioring aside, there's been a few moments that I've had with total strangers that's been scarring, genuinely terrifying moments. I'm going to be talking about the most fucked up situation that I've ever been in my life, and hope to any god out there that it never happens again. The incident happened 4 years ago before New Year's Eve. I was 18 years old at the time, and I finished high school in the summer, and with no activity and nothing else to do, I decided to look for something I could do part-time with my limited skill sets and talents. My mom found out this casting job in a newspaper article, back when she didn't know how to browse the internet, and she called and set up a meeting without really talking to me about it. I decided to play along since I was searching for something anyways, and casting in shows seemed like an awesome choice. I'm 6'1" and I was skinny at the time, so I figured they could make me wear stuff like a clothing model. Needless to say, my naivete got the best of me, and I didn't realize when things did not work that way. I went to the casting studio, and the place was a total wreck. It was in some rundown building at the edge of the city, no windows, the bricks in the walls were cracked, and the withering vegetation was getting a hold of the whole place. It was also strange that there were no people around, but I figured, since this is the city's edge and all, it should be a normal sight. I realized there was no front door, so I went down some stairway on the far end of the building, which led me to a rotted wooden door. There was no handle or anything like that, so I didn't even know if I should push or pull with the tip of my finger somehow. I decided that I must be in the wrong place, so I called their number, which my mom provided me with, and somebody answered. It was, well, she said she was a woman, but I thought she was a man at first. She had such a low-pitched voice. She was very sweet and patient with me, and told me that this is indeed the building I should go into, that I should try to hold the door and push it up a bit, and then pull it towards me slowly, so it wouldn't break from the hinges, and to not be afraid when I come inside, because it's going to be pitch black. Apparently there's no electricity in that area, so I just need to go forward until I feel another door, and that's going to take me to another hallway, which is completely lit up, and take me to their office. Now hold up, what kind of insane dumbass do you think I am to do this? I watch too many horror movies to know this is all kinds of bad. The lady on the other side told me a brief explanation of why the office is like this. Apparently, this was an apartment complex built in the 60s, but it got really wrecked after the 77 earthquake, which killed quite a few people because some of the pillars on the second floor were unstable beforehand, so they had to close it, and no one's really done anything with it since. Since this casting company's budget was really low, they couldn't afford to have a nice-looking office and to be in a nice-looking place, or at least a safe one. One thing that I found sketchy is that somewhere in this conversation she said, "You're alone." Yeah? I thought it was a bit strange, as if she could somehow see me. Her story seemed legit though. I closed the call, opening the rotten door, and sure enough, darkness. I should point out that when I pulled the door to me, there was a chair in front of the door, probably to block it from collapsing inwards, as it apparently swung both ways because of its state of decay. Activated my phone flashlight to look around, and it was really empty. Just a few chairs on the corner and a white ragged and dirty looking tarp on the ground next to them. The door in the front had the same aspect of rotting wood. I figured that they would at least renovate the one to make it look more appealing. I pushed the door gently and it opens with a very loud creak. I think I should have pulled it, but this one had no handles as well. Everything was still dark. I started questioning the system that they use and the fact that they're not professional. The lady told me that the hallway would be lit up, yet it wasn't. With my phone flashlight still on, I scanned the room for clues as to where the office might be. I know how this must seem to you, the reader. How did I not pick up on this incredibly sketchy situation? I am just used to this. In the past, me and my parents didn't have light sources in our backyard, so whenever I need to get something from the pantry, I would do so in total darkness. This whole thing was getting on my nerves, so I deactivated my flashlight and decided to call the number again, as soon as I put my phone at my ear and the light it emitted went out. I heard a loud creak behind me, the sound of the rotting door that I pushed out earlier getting put back into place. I jumped at the sound and let out a sharp yell. I instinctively put my phone out, but the light the dial screen was letting out was too weak to see in front of me. "Hello?" I asked in a worried voice. No response, but in a second I could hear the dial tone from my phone. and I hear a Nokia ringtone, the piano one, from the other side of the room where the door had been closed. I stayed silent for a moment and the ringing stops. I'd never been more horrified in my whole entire life. I crouched down and started moving along the wall to my left as quickly and as quietly as possible. I hear very quiet footsteps coming from my right, but I couldn't tell if they were coming towards me. I formulated a very basic escape plan in an instant. I had a general idea of where the door was, and the footsteps seemed to be directionless. I took 2 coins of 50 bani out of my back pocket and threw them at the corner on the other side of the room, and then fucking booked it. I pushed on the edge of the door at first because I ran way too fast and had no idea where the door was exactly, and then pushed against it to get out of the room. I tripped because I was expecting no resistance, yet a chair was blocking the other side. I heard scampered footsteps behind me and slight grunts. I get up and run away in the dark room with no regards to what I may hit on my path. I just knew the exit would be right in front of me. Sure enough, I hit another chair on the way, the one that I found blocking the door at the entrance, and it propelled me so hard that I bashed the door and knocked it out of its hinges. I opened my eyes, and I was outside. So my first instinct was screaming for help at the top of my lungs. I looked at the building and I finally see him. A tall, overweight man, probably around 300 pounds, carrying a cloth in one of his hands. He was wearing a white tank top and jeans or sweatpants. I couldn't really be bothered to notice at the time. The expression on his face was one of pure anger. I scampered about and ran up the stairs as fast as I could, then turned right to go into town. I ran for about 3 or 4 minutes at full speed, not stopping for anything, until I finally reached the main street, and saw a lot of cars. I was still in a panic state, so I beelined the nearest taxi and told them to take me the fuck home. I called my mother when I was halfway home and told her everything that just happened. She felt sick to her stomach and started crying, and the fact that she put me in that situation and that I might have died. Later that day, I filed a report to our nearest police station, and they sent a dispatch there. We were informed that they found traces of a few blunts, which had cannabis sativa and a double-edged razor on the ground. They also found a broken Nokia flip phone in the dirt outside. My parents told the police that if they found anything else, to please contact them. This has left me with some serious issues, as I now feel very anxious whenever I go to a job interview. I only feel relatively safe if the location is in a very public place, and the interview is at rush hour. One man did this to me, so kids, stay safe and remember, your martial arts training doesn't mean shit when you're scared shitless. The things in the roof. This happened last year, but it was not until this year that things became disturbing. I used to live in a big house, a Queenslander as it's known for its design. It was an old wooden home with 2 levels, propped up by a separating dwelling underneath it. I lived with my girlfriend upstairs. It was just us for the majority. We did have one roommate for a bit, but she left. We rented, and our real estate agents told us there may be some possums in the roof, which wasn't uncommon, and we did hear them every now and then, usually fighting and screeching like no tomorrow. Sometimes you heard them scurry around, which was also not unusual. It's only when night came around did sounds become more unconventional. One thing possums don't do is scratch or knock. They have rather soft feet, and are not known to scratch or make any sort of noise like that. But every few nights, we would hear scratch and knockings above our heads in the bed, and at the time it was very annoying. Then some nights it was a little bit stranger. It was in the roof itself rather than the walls, and it was the distinct sound of walking. Not like the plodding of 4 feet, but the plodding of 2. It sounded like a slow walk from one end of the roof to the other, like a small person walking. There was weight to it that sounded like human, rather than animal. Possums are small and nimble, and rather hard to be heard unless they cause a ruckus. We largely ignored it, because none of us were game to actually check the roof through the manhole. I often made jokes about there being gnomes in the roof, so none of us took it seriously. It wasn't until we began moving out that we noticed something about the manhole that was not the same it had ever been. There were a lot of hand and feet footprints all around it. We used to sleep in that room, and would stare at the roof a lot, but never did we see any marks on it. I'm not sure who or what exactly was in that roof, but I never want to ever find out. I don't feel safe in my apartment anymore. Hello to start off. I'm a 25 stay-at-home mother of two, and I no longer feel safe in my apartment. When we moved in almost 3 years ago, I put a second lock on our door. Our daughter was only 2 at the time, so we put it on there to keep her in, but now I'm convinced it's helped keep someone out. A few months ago, something very strange happened, and I didn't think too much about it at first, but it slowly made me feel unsafe and very paranoid. Someone has been trying to open our door. The first time it happened, my daughter was not in school yet, and my son was only a few months old. My partner works different hours every day, but usually will let me know around the time he will be home, so I can unlock the top lock so he can let himself in with the key. My daughter was 4 years old at the time, and will usually greet her father at the door when he gets home. This night, it doesn't seem she greeted him, but someone else at the door. I was sitting on the couch with my infant son, and I thought I heard someone try to open the door, but it stopped because it was locked, which is normal sometimes. My partner will try the door before unlocking. My daughter heard that and ran to the door. For some reason this time, she decided she would unlock the door and open it to greet him. She normally doesn't do that. I hear her open the door and then shut the door. I was about to scold her for opening the door by herself, and when she came in and told me it wasn't Daddy, I was very thrown off by this. She said it in a sweet, innocent voice, like it's just another thing. But I got kind of freaked out and I went and locked both locks of the door, and I asked her if it was the neighbors. She didn't really get why I was asking these questions. She said no, it was a guy. I told my partner about it. We told her the importance of never opening the door herself again, but now I keep that top locked. I kind of put it out of mind and wrote it off as a weird accident. A few weeks later, and I felt like I'd heard that ever-familiar sound of the door trying to open, but being locked again, but just tried to not have it get to me. One night at around 12:30 a.m., the kids were in bed and my partner and I were watching some late-night TV. We heard someone again try to open the door, but this time, they rang the doorbell and lightly knocked. My partner looked out the peephole and saw 3 men. I told him to absolutely not answer it, and he said they left. I went to the window and looked outside, but I never see anyone leave, which made me believe that they may have been sitting in the stairwell, waiting for us to answer the door. I felt like calling the police, but wasn't completely sure if telling them some people rang the bell and tried to open the door would be something that they would even care about, so I didn't. I started to become more paranoid and honestly felt a little targeted. I'm sure that sounds silly, but we have lived here for 3 years, and only in the last few months has this been happening. Well, it's still not over. The scariest time is coming up. So about 2 to 3 weeks ago, my partner had another late night. This time it was almost 3 a.m. and we heard a sound. Now our daughter is 5, but sometimes we'll have nightmares and come out to us. When she does, she usually will jump off her loft bed and run to her door. That night we heard the sound of what we thought was our daughter waking up and running to her door, so my partner opened the door. He then looked at me strangely, and right when that happened, there was a giant thud at our door and another running sound. We realized then that it was someone running on the stairs outside. My partner looked through the peephole and saw no one. I looked outside and saw no one. That night I took my kids into our room, locked the bedroom door, and pushed something heavy in front of the door, and after having a panic attack where I thought I might actually need medical attention, I silently cried myself to sleep. We got a hold of the landlord the next morning, and were told she would try to get someone to patrol the area. Since then, I do not open the door for anyone other than people I know, and nothing else really happened until today, which is why I'm posting this right now. I just got out of the shower. My daughter is at school, partner is at work, and my son was in his pack and play. I was trying to get dried off when I hear knocking at the door. I am not expecting anyone, so I'm not going to answer it. I then hear the door try to open. I didn't really know what to do. I'm sitting there naked, but so tired of this. I put a robe on and grabbed a knife just in case, but when I looked at the peephole, no one was there. I'm looking into moving. I cannot handle being there. I feel very unsafe and violated, and someone's trying to open our door, especially with my kids here. I need to vent. Thanks for listening, and to the person or people who try to get into our apartment and keep trying to do so, let's not meet. It happened in my bedroom. It happened in my bedroom at the age of 10. I always had trouble sleeping, and spent most nights tossing and turning. I was a horror film fanatic as a child. and being scared was something I didn't have much experience with. I was not afraid of the dark, nor was I easily swayed by strange sounds or odd encounters. I did, however, know when to haul ass out of a situation, or to find a trusted adult. I always slept with my closet doors open, which will come to be sort of a significant later in the story. I should also mention that my family home was in a heavily wooded area, in what some may refer to as the middle of nowhere. At around 1 a.m., I awoke to a sound coming from underneath my bed. It sounded like one of my cats was scratching themselves with one of their feet, or doing something that caused a thumping beneath me. I heard the same sound many times before, and its source has always been one of my fuzzy friends, so this time I didn't look. I closed my eyes and tried to resume my slumber. I turned over onto my left side, which left me facing the wall against which my bed was pressed up. I heard the sound again, and thinking that my cat was directly beneath me, I said, "Good night." I was able to fall asleep once again. The next time I awoke, it was to a surreal and shocking scene. The sheet and comforter of my bed were no longer covering me. I saw a man standing over my bed, poking me, fucking poking me with his finger. And the way in which he did it was truly horrifying. It was not the way a child would poke a friend in jest. It was as if he was touching another human being for the first time, exploring the sensation of the tip of his index finger jabbing at flesh. What I saw was so unbelievable, so impossibly strange, that I believed I was dreaming. I tried desperately to awake from this nightmare, but to no avail. The poking continued. He poked at my chest, my belly, my legs and arms. Paralyzed and scared shitless, I yelled, "Wake up!" And with this, the man threw himself to the floor and closed his eyes, as if he was trying to lead me to believe that he was asleep or dead. I have no fucking idea. It was at this time I realized I could not have been dreaming. I somehow found the ability to move, and I jumped from the top of my bed over the man lying on the floor next to me and ran towards my parents' room. When I got to their bedroom door, something came over me. I told myself that this was all impossible, that there was no way that a person could have entered our home without breaking in, as we had always kept every door and window locked at night. I had seen many strange things in my home while either falling asleep or waking up. By the third or fourth time, after speaking to my mom or dad about it, I knew that it was my mind playing tricks on me. Do not ask why, dear reader, as I have no explanation for you. But I turned away from my parents' bedroom door and decided to hastily check the house for a break-in. What I found was that nothing was out of the ordinary. No broken windows or locks, no busted doors, nothing. I assured myself that I had to have been dreaming or hallucinating, and blamed my obsession with horror for this. I made my way down the long, dark, and narrow hallway to my bedroom. I peeked inside and saw no one. I turned on the light, got down on the floor just outside the doorway, and looked under the bed, nothing. I proceeded to check both of my windows for a sign of a break-in, which were not present. Both windows were closed and locked. I knew it. I was totally seeing things. I crawled back into bed and decided to watch some TV in order to calm myself down and distract from the thoughts of the scary-as-hell dream and hallucination I just had. I turned on the TV, flipped to a channel with a seemingly boring program, and put the remote control on my bedside table. I was lying on my right side, facing away from the wall that I mentioned previously. As I lay there, my eyes began to adjust to the dark room with a faint light from the TV screen. Just beyond the TV, I saw something that made my heart sink into the pit of my stomach. Inside my closet, with one of the doors now slightly closed, I saw the man, standing perfectly still, facing the wall, hiding, waiting for me to fall asleep. I imagined I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. I sat and stared at the man in my closet for what seemed like minutes, but was only likely a couple seconds. I quietly got out of bed, hoping that the man wouldn't notice, and my dad could catch him hiding in the closet. I once again made my way to my parents' bedroom door, still remaining as quiet as I possibly could, and went inside. I shook my dad and my mom at the same time, and when they awoke, I said, "Shh, don't make any sound. There's someone in my closet." My parents both jumped up and said, "What?" I repeated myself and asked them to please call 911. My mom immediately picked up the phone. Neither of my parents doubted my claim, as I've always been honest and forthright. They both knew that there was no way I was making this up, or that I was mistaken. I'm sure that the look I must have had on my face made it clear that this was really happening. My dad told my mom, and that he was going to look, and urged us to stay in their bedroom and lock the door, so we did. At this point, I was beyond scared. I didn't know what the man was capable of, or whether he had a weapon, or whether my dad was safe. I just stood in the room with my mom and cried. After what felt like hours, my dad knocked on the door and told me it was him, and that it was okay to open the door. My mom unlocked the door and let my dad inside. I said something to the effect of, "Did you get him?" And my dad looked at me with the most unsettling and confused look imaginable. He said, "There's no one there." I assured him that there was indeed a man in the home, and that he had been poking me. My dad said he had checked every inch of the house and found no one. He had also checked the doors and windows, just as I had. Then it hit me. He must have a key. As soon as I said this, my parents looked at each other in absolute terror. Our nearest neighbor, a trusted and beloved friend, whom we considered family, was in the possession of a key to our house, as she had regularly babysat me since I was a toddler. She was the only person outside of my immediate family with a key to our home. Soon after this revelation, the police arrived, took statements, checked around the property, and left. None of us got any sleep that night. The next day, my dad went to our neighbor's house and asked if she knew where her key to her house was. She said yes, and when she went to show him, she saw that it was missing. Her home had no signs of a break-in, and she always kept her doors and windows locked. My parents had all the locks on our doors changed, and opted to never again give a key to anyone except in the wake of an emergency. I never discovered the identity of the man that lurked in my bedroom that night. The event left me traumatized, and it took a very long time for me to accept what had happened and move on. My sleeping trouble turned into a full-on insomnia, and for about a decade, I was unable to sleep without a light on. It has been 20 years since that night, and apart from my parents, I had never told a soul about it until now. I actually found writing this to be very cathartic, and I'm glad that I stumbled across Let's Not Meet. My heart goes out to anyone who has suffered a trauma in their lives, and I hope that you are able to find peace within yourselves. Drenched in blood. I've told this story elsewhere before, but after being a long-time reader on Let's Not Meet, I decided that this is the most appropriate story I have, and so I've crafted this new version just for all of you. As per usual, rules of Let's Not Meet, everything said here is 100% truthful and unembellished. I still hold copies of the photographs and the original security incident report, proving that this event took place as described here. I'll be offering the Let's Not Meet mods an opportunity to look at different versions of the report for legal reasons, and asking them to add a verified tag to the story if they are willing. With that said, for a very dark 5-year period in my life, I worked in what my employer called healthcare security, for a professional term. This is effectively a polite way of saying that my employer was a private contractor who rounded up a lot of local goons to serve as poorly trained security officers for numerous local hospitals and other healthcare facilities in our city. The job description stated that we protected the entire campus of whatever facilities we were contracted to work for, and that was true to an extent, but the vast majority of the job took place in emergency rooms and psych departments. Daily assignments involved direct face-to-face interactions with drug addicts, chronic alcoholics, homeless people, individuals recently released from prison, violent criminals injured in conflicts with the police, and most notably, psych patients. Oftentimes, the people we confronted fell into more than one of the aforementioned categories. In addition, for the dangerous patients we dealt with, many of my own coworkers at the security contract company were Let's Not Meet worthy material themselves. Hypothetically, to work for this particular company, you had to pass a background check, a drug test, and obtain a merchant guard license from the city. I occasionally had access to the background check results of some of my coworkers, and it was rare to see anyone get hired with what I personally would have considered a passing result. Over the years, I witnessed a number of people get terminated for some really bizarre sexual assault or harassment situations, amongst a wide array of other generally unprofessional behavior. No doubt several of these incidences would be Let's Not Meet worthy, but I'm not the victim of these stories and I won't try to tell them. Luckily, the facility I spent the most time working for was one of the better ones, and they actually had very well-designed security programs in place. The security program manager whom I worked for was a retired U.S. Army artillery officer and a retired federal law enforcement agent, so he knew this stuff. To the best of his ability, he chased away the more obviously unethical or incompetent security officers, although the company would just keep sending more of them no matter how many he got rid of. The hospital itself was a level 1 trauma center, and when it came to dealing with physical injuries, they were great. Psych patients, not so much. Every patient and visitor entering the hospital emergency department was searched for weapons. To achieve this, there was always a minimum of 2 officers in the emergency department. One officer was inside the emergency department itself, searching patients who arrived by ambulance. The other security officer ran a security checkpoint for anyone who came in under their own power, be they a patient or someone seeking to visit a patient. The checkpoint had a metal detector for people to walk through, and all bags had to be searched as well. It was similar to going through security at an airport, minus the cavity searches and no-fly lists, of course. Additional security officers could be called upon from elsewhere in the facility as necessary. This story takes place at approximately 2 a.m. on a graveyard shift, when I was assigned as the security officer in the emergency department. The shift had gone smoothly for most of the night so far, when I received a radio call from the officer at the security checkpoint, demanding immediate assistance. There was an obvious tone of panic in her voice, and I rushed to the security checkpoint quickly, expecting to be joining in on a fight with some methed-out homeless guy. When I arrived, I was initially confused because everything was quiet, and the officer at the checkpoint was just standing there, quietly examining something on the desk. On the desk in front of the security officer, I saw 3 bags, and I quickly realized that whatever was happening here, it was going to be a more cerebral experience than the typical homeless brawl. The bags I saw were of the following types. Number 1, a Nikon camera bag. I recognized the type of bag as being similar to one a photographer I knew carried. A bag like this often held a camera, which could range in price between $500 to $2,000 or more. Number 2, an extremely expensive leather briefcase, of the type that someone might use to carry both a laptop computer and a large stack of documents. Number 3, a weatherproof storm case of the same brand that we had used when I served in the military. Cases like these often held expensive electronic items or weapons. It was a unique set of luggage to encounter in a hospital emergency room, but that alone wasn't what made the situation so shocking. All 3 bags were completely coated in multiple layers of blood. When I say multiple layers of blood, what I mean is that there were clearly some different patterns in the blood that had ended up on these bags. Some of the blood was already dry and flaky, as if they had been there for a while. Some of the blood was damp and had a sort of matted texture to it, as if it had recently been rubbed onto the bags from some other surface. But most disturbing, there were small droplets of blood, which were still obviously wet, and looked as if they had dripped onto the bags within the last few minutes. Whatever the source of the blood was, it was immediately obvious that these bags had been exposed to that source over a prolonged period of time. Naturally, I asked what in the world happened here. The security officer at the desk was nearly speechless, but she attempted to explain to me that a moment before I arrived, a man had run into the building screaming and ranting. The man, like his bags, was completely covered in blood from head to toe. She wasn't able to understand most of what he said, but she recalled him mentioning a dog and someone kicking down the doors of his house. When she asked to search his bags, he also admitted that there was a gun in the weatherproof case. Not knowing what else to do with the man, she sent him through to get checked in and kept his bags at the desk. That was when she called me, hoping I would know what to do next. Assuming that a situation this bizarre and blood-drenched must involve some kind of crime being committed, I didn't want to open any of the bags and possibly contaminate the evidence. But we couldn't just let a massive quantities of blood sit out in the open and frighten other patients either. So I grabbed a red biohazard bag and placed the 3 blood-soaked items into that bag to contain the mess. Then I contacted a supervisor, which seemed the only logical course of action. The supervisor for that shift was a friend of mine and generally a laid-back guy. After explaining what I'd been told and had witnessed myself thus far, he agreed we might need to call the police to report a possible crime. However, for better or worse, hospitals have to abide by some very strict privacy laws pertaining to patients and what we can share with law enforcement about our patients. So it was decided we need to at least talk to this blood-covered man and get a more coherent story out of him before taking further action. Confronting him in his room in the emergency department, we were surprised to find that he was neither screaming nor ranting, as he had previously been described. He was completely calm. This made his demeanor even more disturbing, as one does not expect a man covered in blood to be calm. He proceeded to be very confident, explaining to us that he had tripped over a dog at his home because the little bastard likes to hide under blankets. He insisted that the blood, which he admitted was an extreme amount, was from a very tiny wound on his head that he had sustained after tripping over the dog. He may have hit his head on either a chair or a TV. He wasn't sure which one. He claimed that after being injured, he tried to lay down in bed, but the blood from his head had soaked all the way through a pillow without stopping, thus convincing him that he needed to seek medical attention. We didn't really buy his story, but we weren't cops and our power was really limited to enforcing hospital policies on our own property, so we didn't really feel like we could directly accuse him of lying to us. but his assigned nurse confirmed for us that the very minor laceration on his forehead would not be sufficient to cause the amount of blood we were seeing on him and his bags. Furthermore, as he was behaving in a completely calm and coherent manner with strong vital signs, he had no signs of significant blood loss, which further cast doubt on his claim that all the blood was his. Our next questions for the man was why he felt the need to bring so many bags with him to the hospital when he clearly felt he had an emergency situation. His response was that he lived in a very dangerous part of the city, and his house had been recently broken into. All his windows had been smashed out, and both the front and back door of the house had been kicked down. As such, he couldn't secure his home at all, and when he wasn't there, he felt as though he had left his valuables at home. Then the thieves would come back while he was gone and steal everything he had left. Hence, he had decided to bring all his most expensive items, camera, computer, and gun, with him when he left the house. He went off into a side story at this point, claiming that someone had recently robbed him of $50,000 worth of antique silverware. Even though his stories had taken a turn from merely suspicious to outright bizarre, we kept pressing him, and our next question was if he would be willing to let us put his blood-drenched bags back in his car in the parking lot. We would usually hold pocket knives and other small items for people, but firearms and expensive equipment we would have to lock up in a safe, which we didn't want to do because everything this man owned seemed to be perpetually covered in blood. So our usual procedures in situations like this was to ask people to take their items back to their car. Oh no, we couldn't do that, the man insisted. You see, the windows of his truck were broken out too, so the truck wasn't secure either. In fact, the doors on the cab of his truck were broken in such a way that they didn't even stay closed on their own, so he had to chain them shut to keep them from flying open while he drove. By this point, the story had morphed from being suspicious to being bizarre to finally being outright disturbing. A man covered in blood had literally just told us, in an eerily calm demeanor, that he has a habit of chaining doors shut. We couldn't resist the temptation to step out into the parking lot to inspect his truck for ourselves. It wasn't difficult to pick out which truck he had been talking about. It was an older model Chevy pickup truck with badly worn white paint and a large pile of garbage in the bed of the truck. As he described it, the driver's side and passenger side windows were missing, and the doors were indeed held shut with some kind of elaborate jury rigging involving chains. Inside the cab of the truck, someone had ripped out large sections of the dashboard, leaving electrical wiring and mechanical components exposed. We later confirmed from CCTV footage that this was the truck the man had come from before entering the hospital. But as with the bags and the man himself, the most disturbing thing about the truck was the blood. The entire interior of the cab was drenched, and even more blood than the man and his bags had been covered with. As with the bags, the blood seemed to be in layers here too. Some of the blood had already dried and began to flake. Some blood was thick and matted, still damp but quickly drying. A lot of the blood was still clearly wet, however, including droplets that were falling from the roof of the cab and the large pool of blood, which was forming in what appeared to be a small storage space in the center console. The most notable thing was the massive wave of blood, which appeared to have been splashed onto the interior of the windshield, directly in front of the steering wheel. I have no idea how that truck got into our parking lot, because it should have been impossible for anyone to drive with that much blood covering the windshield. There was some of the blood on the exterior of the truck too, but in much smaller amounts. It was smeared in small streaks all around the vehicle, as if someone had walked in a circle around the vehicle and intentionally smeared those small streaks in random locations. Aside from that, and some natural-looking wear and tear, the vehicle had no other obvious exterior damage. At this point, we notified the charge nurse for the emergency department, and she called the police to report the situation. It must have been a slow night, or the police were just very interested in seeing this for themselves, because multiple officers from the local police department showed up only a few minutes later. The first thing they wanted to see were the bags. I put on gloves and removed them from the red biohazard bag. The police looked at the bags, and that was all they did. They refused to open them or touch them at all, because they said the situation wasn't enough to give them probable cause to search the man's property without his permission. Next, the police spoke with the man. Their conversation went largely the same way that the conversation my supervisor and I had with the man earlier had gone. He repeated the same story about tripping over a dog, his house being broken into, and bringing his things to the hospital to safeguard it, all told in the same eerily calm demeanor. The police didn't seem to believe the story any more than we did, but they didn't accuse him of lying either. They didn't write down anything even. They asked for his address, which he gave them, and then said they would have to contact the police department, which had jurisdiction over the city where his address was located. While they waited for a response from the other department, they went to examine his truck and seemed as baffled by it as we had been. A short while later, one of the police officers spoke to us again to notify us of the outcome. The other police departments where the man lived had checked their records to see if any crimes had been reported at the man's home or if he had a prior record, but they found no evidence of any wrongdoing, and that was it. Everyone just dropped it. There wasn't even going to be an official report because they said there was nothing to report. My supervisor and I were mystified. We knew that local police were notoriously lazy and often unhelpful, particularly when it came to writing reports, but this was the most outrageous thing we had seen them ignore by far. I flopped down at the security checkpoint and started writing my own report. At the very least, I wanted to make sure we covered our own asses by showing them what we had done and that we had done our jobs. We had investigated this to the greatest degree in which we were allowed to and made every single effort to report a possible crime to the police. Luckily, it was quiet at the checkpoint at this time of night, so I had plenty of time to assemble a detailed report with images of the blood-drenched man and his truck attached to the report. While I was still working on the report, the man was discharged. He had cleaned himself slightly, but his clothes were still stained with large quantities of blood. He asked for his bags back, and I hauled them out from under the desk to hand them over. Before leaving, he declared that he needed to check the serial number on his weapon before leaving. He opened the plastic case right in front of me, and without taking the weapon out, he showed it to me in plain view. It was a beautiful 1911 handgun, completely clean, no blood on it or inside of the case, and the whole setup looked like it was brand new. Then he slammed the case shut, took his bags, and disappeared back into the night, from whence he came. That was the last time any of us ever saw the man drenched in blood, so it appears that we shall indeed not meet again.